Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Martha VanDam has hit more than a few bumps in life, and she uses her experience and wisdom to help others. Today, our conversation focuses on betrayal, how it impacts our life, our self-worth, and our very sense of reality. How does one come back from such an experience, and what might lie ahead? Please welcome Martha VanDam to Bump in the Road. Martha, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Of how I got to be dealing with women with infidelity, this piece of the story. Sure. So it's maybe not like some other people because I hadn't walked through that. It wasn't that I walked through it and then became passionately involved with it. I actually was beginning my career as a therapist, and my partner was a certified sex addiction therapist. And so I started being around lots of these families. He would see usually the men. There are plenty of women who deal with sex addiction, but he would see usually the men, and that left these wives, girlfriends, significant others in the wake of this horrible experience they were having. It just kind of naturally brought an influx of those clients for me to deal with. And I loved it. And I began to feel such a connection and such compassion for these women. I discovered that other betrayals in my life were similar to what they had experienced, although I had not experienced this specific type of betrayal. And the more I learned about it, though, the more I worked with these ladies. And then, of course, you learn your work, And I grew just to have a great passion about it and love working with those ladies. I've just learned, and I've been doing this for about 12 years now, and I couldn't count the hundreds of women that have come through. I've had groups, listened to them interact. That's been exciting. But that's how it happened. It really was all because I had a partner who was a certified sex addiction therapist. I didn't even know it existed for a long time. And then poof, there you realize there's this underworld of people. You don't see them because people who've been betrayed, as you know, they keep it more to themselves. They don't go into work and go, oh, I just found out I've been betrayed and my husband's a sex addict. It just doesn't happen that way. So we don't know that it's really surrounding us. And so then, of course, I became more and more tuned into how often it is happening and how many, many people are so wounded and damaged by this behavior. And whether it's addiction or an infidelity, a weekend or a year or a period of time with one person, still it's all betrayal.
You mentioned there are some different types of betrayal. What are they?
Oh, okay. So, well, we can be betrayed sexually.
Yeah.
But we can also be betrayed emotionally. There can be an emotional sort of affair. But then there are betrayals of trust, betrayals of not being there for our person, betrayals of choosing everybody on the planet or work over the person that we've committed to. You can be betrayed in so many ways, like that, just outside of sexual infidelity.
Yeah, I interviewed one person, actually more than one person, whose husband essentially committed a financial betrayal in that through business endeavors, they lost everything, and the wives were the last to know.
Sure. And that absolutely is a betrayal. It absolutely is. I think all betrayals maybe affect us in some ways different and in some ways similar. But they are all at their core. They are a terrible trauma. They create unbelievable grief, but also wonderful opportunities for growth and new life afterward. That's what I find exciting. I absolutely love helping women find their solid footing again and find a direction and then create a wonderful and solid lives for themselves, whether they're with their partner or without.
Let's focus on the opportunity side, because I agree with you. I think it's hard to find that opportunity. And I think that sometimes you find yourself just carrying this weight from the past with you, even as you open new opportunities. But it really does offer a new start if you want it.
It does. It absolutely does. And in every case of a couple that I've worked with, once they've dealt with the infidelity piece, what they find is that there were other things that were in the relationship that were not healthy. And the infidelity brings to light all the other pieces, because it's kind of like once you find out your husband has done that, you are not going to put up anymore with just snarky attitudes. I don't want to hear that from you, because now I'm dealing with this other thing. So it just brings to light these other things that we may have walked past, ignored, just kind of learned to live with. And so it creates an environment. If the people are going to work on their relationship, it creates an environment where now they're working on things that actually could have been worked on in years past, things that were holding them back. And whether it's in the relationship or simply individual within themselves. And actually, to be honest, individually within themselves, that's where I see the most change and the most work. And so women learn how maybe they've been, an example would be an awful lot of women learn that they've put themselves aside all of their lives to take care of their husbands and their children and their jobs and their aunts and uncles and moms and dads. And they realize, oh, I never have paid attention to really who I am and let that come out. I've just held it in all these years. Well, when they start addressing that and they start becoming more authentically genuine themselves, they kind of have life in a fresh and exciting way for the first time. And I would never say to someone that an affair is a good thing that happens to you, but I absolutely can see where wonderful things can come out of it.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think that your point that a lot of women put everyone first, and then they wake up sometime in midlife, 40-ish or so, could be somewhere in that range, and they just wonder, what in the world am I doing? They haven't done anything for themselves. And I think that's a really tough place to be, because you really have to almost strip yourself down to bare bones and rebuild yourself in terms of, what do you like? Who are you? Where are you going? What defines you? I mean, we all depend on these external factors to define us. And it's really hard to have to turn that inwards and start defining ourselves from the inside out.
Was extremely difficult. And this keeps coming up. I notice I will ask women this happens almost in every session with a new session with a woman. I'll be trying to get to the core of what are some things that are valuable to her? What are some things that she loves to do? Because we're going to try to begin to integrate that back in, so she begins to grow that sense of self that has been mutilated and sometimes annihilated when there's been betrayal that's gone on. And one of the questions I'll ask is, what do you love to do for fun? I cannot count the women who, when I ask them, what do you like to do for fun? They sit there a minute, they have a little bit of a deer in the headlights, I'm lost look, and then they'll go, I don't know, or I don't remember. And they're not kidding. They're not being sarcastic. They're not trying to make a point. They genuinely don't remember. Because at this point in life, what do they do for fun? I take my child to a soccer game. I go to my husband's event at work. I go to my event at work, and then I come home. That's not fun, but they've gotten into that's just what their lives revolve around, and they've completely forgotten. Most of the time I end up going back and saying, so what did you love to do when you were a child? What was fun when you were in high school? And then they can come up, well, I liked to be with my friends. I liked hiking. I got on a horse, or I got on a bicycle. Eventually they can come up with some things, but they sometimes have to go back decades to remember a time that they kind of felt alive in their own skin. That's pretty intriguing to me.
It is. I think it's intriguing and awful that as adults we forget what it is to have fun.
Isn't it sad? And I actually think that as adult women, we've been socialized through time to nurture and care, but for others, not ourselves.
Or in a professional realm, I think that carries over, where you're nurturing and caring for clients, perhaps, and not yourself.
Sure. Absolutely. I have to watch that myself. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I spoke to a lawyer the other day, and she found herself really at a point of caring for others constantly, her clients. And she was a terrific lawyer. I mean, she made partner at a major firm and everything else. But she also hit a wall where it was, what about me?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mhm.
how do you learn to nurture yourself and nurture a sense of fun in midlife?
That's a good. I love that question. And the fun thing about that question is that discovering the answer is just all fun. It's not like some of that deep, dark stuff that you have to dive in and weep over. It's no, let's discover, what do you really like to do? And so a piece of it, yes, we can look back and say, what are some things that I've always thought I might like to do and I never have tried, or what did I like to do as a kid? That can be a piece of it. And another piece of it, when you give a woman some freedom and you give them an assignment. So, one of the things I'll do is I'll say, between now and the next time I see you, I want you to find one thing to do simply for yourself, just something for fun. It cannot be that you come in next week and you look back and you think of, what did I do? It has to be something that you do intentionally. And that puts a woman in the position of having to think about, okay, what would I like to do? And to begin with, it may feel a little rocky. It may be hard. And so they may say, well, one woman this week told me, well, I've always wanted to feel free to go to movies by myself. So I just went and I watched a movie by myself. And that was kind of a little out of the norm. It's not really what we think about doing all the time. And she thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just the beginning step of knowing I'm okay to make decisions for what I like to do. I'm okay to do it by myself if I want to. And I'm okay to pull the trigger and go do the fun thing. And then another thing is kind of encouraging people. Sometimes it's just giving them ideas. What kind of class do you think you might enjoy? Would you like a cooking class or a music class or a language class? Do you like outside things? Would you like to maybe try some horseback riding lessons, or hike new trails, join a running club, a bike club, a kayak club? What kinds of, just giving ideas and permission. Maybe that's a big piece of it. Just giving a woman permission to investigate and say yes to something that previously she might have said, well, I don't know, it's going to cost this amount of money, or the kids need something that weekend. So we talk ourselves out of it by giving them permission. And actually, in the case of counseling, giving them an assignment, they feel more free.
I love the idea of an assignment. I think for a lot of people, learning to do things by themselves is really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Why is that?
I would suppose that an awful lot of it has to do with literally not feeling comfortable with ourselves. When we get quiet and we're alone, well, our thoughts come in. And then sometimes we think we have thoughts that really have needed to be addressed, would be healthy to be addressed, but they're not real comfortable. So it's a whole lot easier to get busy. To be honest, that's a whole lot of reason why our phones can be so much trouble for us, because when it would be good for us to sit and be still and think and contemplate and kind of make peace with ourselves, what do we do now? Pretty often is grab the phone and we scroll through, and it keeps our brains occupied, and we don't have to go to those uncomfortable places.
Oh, it's so funny you said that. I was thinking about the phone just as you were speaking. I can remember back in, it must have been the early 90s, I went maybe it was the late 80s. Anyway, somewhere around there. I took a cross-country trip and by myself, and I was at a theater at intermission. And this was before cell phones or anything like that. And I remember just sitting on the wall out in the patio, observing everybody. And I had so many aha moments in terms of watching people and their interactions that I never could have had if I'd had a cell phone to hide behind.
True. It's true. And you wouldn't have noticed those things either if you had somebody sitting with you.
No, never.
You'd be focused on that person. And again, I go back to either how we've been socialized, or we go back to through life, every experience we have, our brain is learning. It's kind of like AI, except hopefully we have empathy and a conscience. But our brain learns from the things that it experiences, clearly. And so if we've learned all along to kind of be quiet or to keep ourselves busy, then we've learned to be uncomfortable with that quietness. Instead of learning to explore and see what's there. And so once we learn about that, we hear about it, then we can ask ourselves, okay, wait, do I allow myself time for that? Is that something I want? And we can lean in that direction if we want to. It's kind of, until we hear about it, we often don't think about it. Life just keeps us so busy.
No, it's really interesting. You talk about learning from our experiences. And so often we focus on the negative aspects of our experiences. I mean, I think we all do it. But if you can pause and explore those positive experiences, it's a
Mhm.
totally different reality, isn't it?
It is a totally different reality. It absolutely is. And you're right. We can't separate the bad out of the uncomfortable, the unpleasant, out of our awful experiences. We may think we want to because that pain is really uncomfortable, but it is not healthy and it is not good. And we actually can't push aside without it coming up later. So we have to deal with those painful things. We have to feel them and work through them. But if we can get to the place where we can look and see what is the growth that's coming out of this, then we're not losing the wonderful benefits that can come from the pain. In my mind, why on the planet would we want to waste something as big and as awful as betrayal or cancer or horrible diagnosis? Why would we want to waste that if something wonderful can come out of it? We're going to experience the bad. That's a given. That can't be avoided. Why in the world would we give up the good that comes along with it? That seems a little crazy.
It does. I think a lot of people get so mired in the bad, they can't see the good.
Well, that's true. That is very, very, very true.
You know, I used to think 40% of us will have a cancer diagnosis. And I used to think that that was a tremendous societal entree into greater self-knowledge and consciousness. It's not. I think that of the people who have cancer, at best, and I think I'm being generous, 15% of the people really have a major shift in their lives.
Really?
I think a lot of people, and maybe my numbers are off, but I think many people across society, not just in cancer or anything else, more than anything, want to go back to the status quo. And you can't go back.
No, you can't go back. That's true. You can't go back. And the same with betrayal. You absolutely can't go back. In fact, you don't even want to go back because with betrayal, something was set up in some way that somehow this person chose to do this thing, this betrayal thing that was so painful. There had to be a set of circumstances in place that made that the obvious next step for him or her. We really don't want that setup to be in place any longer. Whether it was all in that person, whether it was a family dynamic, whatever was going on that made it easy for betrayal to be the next step, we just don't want to go back and live like that anymore. But I understand what you mean. But I think when we think that, we're just thinking about, it's kind of like it felt nicer to be ignorant. Ignorance is bliss. It was nice when everything felt peaceful. I didn't realize but it was nice, but it wasn't real. And so it was kind of a fake out.
Oh, but that brings up the topic, and we were talking about this earlier. What is real? Because I think that when you go through something like betrayal, all of a sudden you don't know what's real anymore, and you don't know if the past that you perceived was real.
It's true. It's true. Yes, we were talking, you lose past, present, and future in a way, because the past that you believed it to be is not completely the past. It's not the past that you believed it to be. We said, okay, so you remember the last holiday that you were on with your husband, and then later on you find out he was texting someone else during that holiday. You thought you were having a fun time. You've got great memories. You have memorabilia you've brought back and pictures, and so it was in your mind this great holiday. And then you find out, whoa, what does this mean? He was talking to somebody else when he was with what? What is that? And so trying to make sense of what my past looked like. All the times I thought you were picking up the kids, but you were doing something else. What does that mean about my past? My present is now, it just feels obliterated and blown up. It's hard to find solid ground in the present. Your emotions are all over the place because of the wound and the trauma. And then every idea that you had about what your future was going to look like, it also is up in the air now. And so a person, when a woman gets hit with that news, people sometimes maybe from the outside, if they haven't experienced it or don't know enough about it, just don't realize the extent of that trauma. It knocks her to her knees and in an instant makes her feel like everything she has known to be true is obliterated and she doesn't know what is truth and what is not truth. That is an incredibly frightening place to be. Incredibly. I can remember at one point in time in my life from a different circumstance, but I can remember thinking, I think the sky's blue, but I'm not sure that I trust myself to come up with that. We get so blown away that we hardly know what to trust or believe, even in of ourselves.
Yeah. How do you find your grounding after something like that? I mean, it does not happen overnight.
That's the key. It's a process and it happens slowly. It's like birth of anything, the production of anything. It takes time. It takes gentleness. It takes healing. It takes being kind with yourself, but also surrounding yourself with other people who will be kind with you. You absolutely, positively have to have some sort of support. It's virtually impossible for great healing to happen in a vacuum and alone. We have to have some kind of support. And the difficult thing about betrayal is that on some levels, it shouldn't be, but on some levels, we feel that it's humiliating. So we don't share. And also then there's this business, very truthful business of, if people know, how is that going to affect my life financially? If people at my husband's place of work know, is it going to affect his job, which is going to affect our income? Is, how is it going to, if the children know, how is it going to affect that? I mean, it just, the neighbors, family members. So people hold it in and then they struggle alone. Well, you're talking about this healing and moving forward. That just makes it so much more difficult to heal and move forward. So I always say from the get-go, we've got to find, even if it's a small group, it can be tiny, it can be just one or two people, but there must be one or two people that you can share and share everything without fear of judgment and without that person telling you what you need to do. We need to find a little bit of just someone who'll sit with you and go, yeah, that sucks. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Oh man. And just be with you. And maybe sometimes if there's offer if there's a need that you need a place to sleep, someone who will offer you a place to sleep. I know in my previous traumatic experience with a long-term relationship, someone offered me a place to sleep. They offered me a place to put some of my things. I mean, odd things come up that are problems. Where do you keep your furniture or your precious things if you don't have any place to put them? And so if a friend doesn't offer you a garage to put your things in, then what? So it's being a friend can be, what do you need, sweetheart? I'll be there for you for what you need. It doesn't mean fixing things, but it means we do need somebody to come alongside us. And we can find it. Some people will say, well, I just don't have it. It may not be that you have it in your immediate circle, but you can find groups, maybe online. Very often there are professionals who can be there and help. There are places like church groups or civic groups. There are pastors, priests, rabbis, people like that who can be support. There are supports. We may have to look a little bit, but there are supports. And that's a first thing, is we've got to find somebody so that you've got your 4:00 in the morning person to call. Who can you text at 4 a.m. and they're going to go, I got your back. You're going to make it through this.
The internet and technology has really changed our relationships for the better in that type of regard, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I do think. I know we're talking about betrayal, but when I had my cancer, being part of a group that had that specific type of cancer was life-giving. It was probably one of the biggest things that carried me through. So being a part of a group of women who've dealt with betrayal. That being said, I have an awful lot of women that I counsel. They can only be in those groups for certain periods of time, because when they start moving beyond and they start feeling healthier, they don't want to continually be reminded of the earlier traumas. So they find themselves kind of trying to slide out. They don't want to hear about that over and over again anymore. That was icky. It was yuck. They're trying to live. So they often will slide out of those groups, which then leaves the people in the group scared to get to death. They don't see the success stories. They see only all the bad. So it's got its good and its bad. You can get support while you're going through the bad, but once you're through it, you may not want to keep listening to it.
Yeah, I think groups always tend towards the lowest common denominator, and when you're all in the same denominator, it's okay.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Once you start moving on, you need a different sort of energy, and if you have to recognize that. Sure.
And I think the ladies that I've worked with, they do recognize it, because they'll say, every time I listen, it's just almost scary to go back there again. And it's then time for you to find a different group. It's time for you to move on.
No, and in moving on, you have to find a new tribe. And we all have our tribes. If you're married, chances are you're socializing with other married people. Maybe you belong to a club, sure. Whatever your situation is. And when all that's gone, building a new tribe, wow, how do you go about doing that?
Well, especially since the one thing that's been, again, I'll use the word obliterated in a woman who's been betrayed is her sense of who she can trust. So you try to get involved in a group, but you also have this issue with trust. You know, how can I trust? So that's pretty tricky for women. So I'll go back to what I think is one of the biggest lessons women have to learn when they're walking through this is they have to learn to trust themselves again. And you have to learn to trust yourself before you can really be able to lean into trusting someone else or even learning to trust a group. I would say you put your toes in a little bit at a time in a group, not being completely vulnerable because you want to feel like you're protecting yourself. You're learning again to protect yourself. Someone in your world did not protect you. And so now that leaves you to step up and realize, okay, it's me. I'm the one who must protect myself. But that's not a bad thing. That's yay. Who better? Who knows me better than me? Who knows what's important to me more than me? So it's not bad for us to be protecting ourselves. It's wonderful. Women will find when they discover they've been betrayed, they will find that when they look back, there were instances pretty frequently that they had kind of questions. Something didn't feel quite right. So their intuition was working. But husband or partner said, oh, you're just being silly. Oh, you're just being jealous. Oh my gosh, she's just a friend. What is wrong with you? Husband said those kinds of things, which made her tamp down. Okay, it's just me. I need to not be that way. And they begin to then tamp down their inner intuition, that inner voice, the brain that's picking up on tiny inconsistencies. And they learn to not trust themselves. And they have to learn that again. And there's great power in learning to trust ourselves, learning to trust that our brain does pick up on tiny inconsistencies. It does pick up on when a relationship feels a little distant all of a sudden, or when something feels just off. And if we can learn to even if we don't know what it's from, if we can recognize something doesn't feel quite the same, then, and if we can trust that we may not know what it is, but we know something's not right. And the more we can trust ourselves, then the better we can trust ourselves in groups and with friends, because we can determine better who is safe for us and who is not.
I think also getting reunited with our intuition is really important, because I think that we live in such a linear world in many ways. You go to this school, you get this job, you're being constantly molded by a set of systems and beliefs that are very much outside of you, behaviors, everything.
True.
And I think that to reunite yourself with that inner intuition, it's hard, but I think it may be one of the most amazing things you ever do, because all of a sudden you will see the world so differently.
It's true. It's very, very true. We may not know, we see it differently, and we may not even be able to put a finger on maybe what some of the different is. But as we if we trust that and then allow our minds to continue to be open, then we'll continue to pull in more and more and continue to learn. I have learned in my practice that when a client says something, or I'll notice just a look pass across their eyes, just almost in a nanosecond, really, really quickly, what my brain will pick up on is, ooh, something. I won't know what it is, but I'll know there was something there. And what I've learned to do with that is not to fight to find out what it was, but also not to push it aside, just to kind of set it off to the side. Okay, there's something there. I don't know what it is, but it'll make its way known. And almost invariably, within a pretty short period of time, something else will be revealed through word or action or tone or something. And I will realize, oh, that's what it was. Okay. I knew it. I knew there was something there. And actually, Pat, that's what these women who have sort of felt like there was something going on in the relationship with their spouse or their partner, if they feel like something's not right, but they keep getting it pushed down, down, down by the partner, an awful lot of the time when they finally find the proof or they get the disclosure, finally they realize, an awful lot of women will have a piece of a sense that feels like, I knew it. It's like a relief. I'm not crazy. I knew there was something there. And so it's this odd mix of, yes, I'm devastated, but I'm also relieved I'm not crazy.
No, the being crazy part, I think, is very real. And but I think what happens is when you start trusting your intuition, you create a version of truth out there in the world that is yours, and it resonates with you. And nobody can ever take that away from you if you hold on to it.
That's true. That's true. Yes. And what a great example that then there's something solid,
Yeah.
because everything else you have discovered was not solid. And to begin, so I would say that's a big piece of that beginning to move forward, is that beginning to realize, no, you are a whole person all in and of yourself. Some of that may have gotten squashed down. Some of it likely has gotten squashed down. We're going to find it. We're going to help that come out and help you then feel more alive than you've ever felt. To me, that's exciting, Pat. That's really exciting that we can have that kind of aliveness that maybe we've never even felt before.
What about men who are betrayed? Do they go through a similar process?
Almost exactly the same. I have not dealt with as many men. They just don't find their way into my office as much. I don't know what that's about. But the men that I have dealt with feel exactly the same as the women have felt. And maybe even less free to deal with some of those emotions, because they've been socialized not to. They've been socialized to be the man. What, she did that to you? Well, just drop her and go on. Is kind of what they've been told. But just like us, they've developed relationships. The relationship can be complicated. You've tied up together now with property and belongings and children and relationships and experiences. It's not that easy to walk away from. From my experience, they have had the exact same experience that the women have, but maybe don't feel the freedom to even deal with it. We feel like we have to keep it quiet, but they have it even worse as far as being able to find an ear to listen to them, and even to find material. There's not as much online that's written for men, and as many books that are written for men who've been betrayed as there are kind of geared toward women.
It all comes down to trying to name and understand our emotions, but I think most of us are emotionally illiterate in that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to express what you may be feeling.
It is true. It is very, very true. Yeah, even as much as I deal with it, I'll still land on, how do you feel? Happy, sad, glad, mad. I mean, that's kind of like the average 4 or 5. And, and really, what I love to do every now and again, you can download, you've seen them online. You just Google emotion wheel or feelings wheel PDF. There's about 5,000 copies of them out there. They all look the same. Copy one of those, because it's got so many different emotions to think about, and see if you can identify, wait, am I feeling alone, or am I feeling lonely? Am I feeling unsure? Am I feeling unstable? Am I feeling unsettled? Because there's so many layers, much deeper than just the top few. And if we can, you're right, if we can label it, then we're much better equipped to then know what to do, how to deal with it. Another thing to remember about feelings is we tend to think that feelings are bad, especially if they're uncomfortable. We think feelings are bad and we have to fix them. But in all reality, feelings are a fact and we want to learn from them. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, it's not the feeling. It's whatever's happening underneath the surface that may be creating the feeling, the inconsistency, the injury. That's what's creating the feeling. Feelings just in and of themselves are not bad. They may be highly uncomfortable sometimes, but they're not bad. And so I would say, yes, we focus on feelings because they're going to be a clue, but we don't want to stop there. We want to go below it and find out, what's pushing that? There's a belief or an experience pushing that feeling. Let's get to what that is. That's where the meat and the healing and the growth comes from.
Oh, I think so too. And I think asking the question, what can I learn, is
Mm-hmm.
probably I think it's one of the most profound questions we can learn to ask ourselves, because every day we are presented with something that doesn't quite sync up with us or brings up some emotion. And
Right.
it is always an issue within ourselves. And I think if we start asking, what do I need to learn? It
Right.
opens up a really magical interior world where learning is infinite.
True. So very true. So very true. I think a thing that is a sticking point that keeps us from being able to as easily ask that question, what can I learn, is that most of us we've been socialized. It's a part of our American culture, at least. I don't know about other cultures, but we've been socialized that we kind of have this automatic judgment that goes on in our mind kind of all the time in the background. And we're sort of dividing everything that we see, experience, hear, feel into two camps, good or bad. It's either good or bad. And so then when something happens, like a betrayal, we do this automatic, oh, that's bad. It shouldn't have happened. And then we want to hang out in that place of where we've judged it. It's bad. It shouldn't have happened. Well, I will agree. In 99.9% of the situations, it should not have happened. But I will also say, if we stay in, but it did happen. So if we stay in the, it shouldn't have happened, then we don't go beyond, yeah, well, it did. So now what? So how are we going to move beyond it shouldn't have? So the emotion keeps us in, oh, this is painful. Oh, this is bad. Oh, this shouldn't have happened. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe, and then we reiterate all the things bad about it and stick in there, stay in there. We've got to get out of that spot and be able to say, well, it did. I didn't want it. I didn't intentionally do anything to make it happen. This is not where I want to be, but I am. And now what am I going to do about it? And there's where there's this little switch that can happen. And at that switch, now we can begin to grow. That doesn't mean that it suddenly gets okay, not by a long shot. But that's when we can start developing, seeing the growth that comes out of it, seeing the jewels that can be in there for us through it.
No, you're so right about that. And we tend to judge in black and white, whereas in reality, it's all gray.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I think the lesson, I realized that how overarching it is in every part of our life, was I realized when I pull out of my parking lot to turn right, I look to the left and I realize I have a judgment on what I see as good or bad. There's 5 or 6 or 7 cars. Oh, that's bad. I'm going to have to wait. Now I'm not thinking all of that, but I feel, oh, or it'll go the other way. Oh, there's no one coming, as though that's good. And a bunch of cars or no cars are not good or bad. It's just a fact. But our mind, and that adds pressure to us, pressure to find the good, stay away from the bad. And there needs to be no pressure whatsoever. It's just a fact. And what am I going to do with it? There's 4 cars. I'd better wait if I don't want to get smashed. There's no cars. I'll pull out now. That's what I'll do. It's not good or bad. It's just a fact. Well, so we've found out that our husband has had an affair. Clearly, we'll put that in the bad category. And this is very painful, very, very painful. But we don't want to just stay in there. It's bad, 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 bad. Yeah, it is. It was. Now what? We want to move forward. What do we do with it? It's like, do we wait at the intersection or do we go? Well, how do I move forward now that I found out this really horrible thing, this really painful thing in my relationship? How do I move forward? And then we start picking up the pieces.
And now I'm not going to remember the name of the Japanese art where they take shattered pottery and they fill the crevices with gold. Are you familiar with
it? And someone just mentioned that to me just yesterday in session. We were talking about it. Yes. And they consider that to be very valuable. Once that piece has been repaired with the gold, it's even more valuable than it was before it was broken.
And it's more resilient and possibly, a real beautiful work of art that wouldn't have existed if not for the fact that it was so scarred.
No, it's very, very true. It may, that in that case of a pot, it may be used the same way, but it's now more beautiful. And like you said, stronger. Sometimes things I have in my office something I use for a similar, it's behind me. Something I use for a similar story is I've got a pot behind me that's made out of mosaic. It's actually made from one of my kitchen plates that was broken and saved and then put back together with tile, broken mosaics. And so now there's this beautiful pot. It's not used the same way. It doesn't hold soup, but it holds pretty plant. And that's a reminder to me that broken things can be reshaped and they can be used either the same or in different ways. But they could actually be, I treasure that one more than any of my plates at home right now because it's kind of got a story and it's pretty sitting in here. And I use it every day. I don't use all my other plates every day.
No, I think there was a woman in California who used to do some hands-on counseling with cancer patients, and she would have them create a beautiful plate. They'd put it in the kiln and fire it. And then when it came out, she had them smash it.
Wow.
And they had to use these broken pieces to recreate something of beauty. Perhaps it can be usable, perhaps not, but they had to create something from those broken pieces. And I thought that was such a powerful exercise. That has always touched me so much.
Yes. What a fabulous idea. I love that. And I especially love the fact that she had them make the plate first before they destroyed it because there was more invested It's not like just a plate they'd bought. They were invested in that plate. And we do feel like we've invested in our marriages. We've invested in our families. We've invested in our lives. And then when it feels to be broken, it's not like something you've bought. It's something you've invested sometimes years, sometimes decades in. And so you've invested so much of yourself. What a wonderful picture of the fact that you can even take something that you have created and has been broken, and you can use that. I'm with you. I love that idea. Love it very much. I may try to come up with a way to use that myself.
You should. I think it's a terrific idea. You've hit some bumps in the road. If you could rewrite your story in any way, would you?
That is such a great question, Pat. And I've asked that so many times. I've asked that myself. I like me better now. I would not be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't been through the bumps that I've been through. If I hadn't at some point in time ended up divorced, if I hadn't been forced into counseling myself because I was going through so much of my own absolute awfulness, I wouldn't be doing this. Cancer to me was absolutely the most devastating thing I could ever face. Again, I like myself better because of it. And so I'm not sure that I'd ever raise my hand again and say, hey, I want to go through that. But I absolutely am grateful for everything that's come out of it. And I'm almost 63 years old. I've had a broken long-term marriage. I have estrangement from a child. I have, certainly there was the cancer. I had a sister who committed suicide. I have a chunk of things that were very, very, very difficult. And I certainly wouldn't ask to say, yeah, let's just arrange life that way. But I guess maybe that's the point. We don't get to ask really how some things are going to happen in our life. We have no control over other people. We don't have any control over the government entities and things that happen that have, someone goes into a school and shoots up a school. You and I had no control over that. Our child gets injured. We had no control over that, but our lives are affected forever. We just don't have a say in an awful lot of the things that happen to us. But what I will always go back to my people with is things happen that you had no control over. By golly, reach in. Let's take hold of the things that we do have control over. That's where we have our power. And if we use our power to affect the things that we do have control over, we're alive again. That doesn't mean everything gets pretty and roses and rainbows and unicorns. I get that. But at least it takes us to a place where we feel better about what we're doing. We feel good about ourselves. We feel that we've done the best we can, and also find some beauty and some pleasure in the world. There's an awful lot of beauty. There really is. And when we're so trapped in the ugly, we miss the beauty. If we can intentionally take ourselves out mentally for a little while and recognize that the horrible things that have happened to us are a slice of us. They're not all of us. They may affect it all, but they're not all of us. And let's put attention on the other pieces of us sometimes. Wow, and let that grow. It can put us into a better balance. It really can.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.